Welcome everyone to episode 11 of Trio Talks. So we have myself and co-host Nick Mizell, the be and end all of McNair Scholar stuff at Southeastern Oklahoma State University. And we have our 11th guest. So 11 happens to rhyme with heaven, and that is a very good metaphor for today's guest, heavenly. So,
Aw.
um, so before we do the interview, and we're missing Philip today. Philip is just too caught up with World Cup stuff that he's gotten caught up in Mexico and he's detained. Uh, while having fun, he's being fully engaged in the process of the World Cup in Mexico City. So he will be back next week, and I'll be reminiscing and going through some World Cup stuff myself. So I will not be here next week. But next week's guest is someone that is also very good and a former Southeastern student. So the purposes of this podcast that our office does is threefold. We talk with Trio professionals and we talk with Trio alumni. And Trio alumni is any student that has been a part of a Trio program. That doesn't mean completion of a degree or educational certificate. It just means participation in a Trio program. Because as we'll see when we talk to today's guest, some Trio programs are one and done. They do not follow a student throughout the entire academic career of a student. They, uh, they see them once and they do do all the record keeping for that one service that they provide to students. And we're going to get more into that. But even those types of people are defined as TRIO alumni. And through interviewing different students that have been a part of TRIO programs and different TRIO professionals that work in different TRIO programs, we see the full scope from the sun to the moon to the full solar system of what TRIO programs do and the whole variety of services that we provide to students and how they excel. The second goal of the podcast and we've been very fortunate in that every week, everyone's told a different thread, a different story of what they add to what Trio does and see how Trio works. So if when anyone ever goes to a Trio conference or Trio group activity, there's this catchphrase that someone shouts trio and then someone else shouts works. And how do we show how it works? Well, we take time to interview people and we talk with students about how they've benefited from in their career. So with receiving services through TRIO programs and participation in TRIO program, their career is much greater and better than it would have been before. And their socioeconomic position, their pocketbook, because everyone needs help with their finances. And education is a great way to do that. And we show that through interviewing different people with different stories. And third, we have our person that we interview talk about how they practice giving back for what they've received. And we call that segment four gratitude. Um, so, with that said, since we've established why we do what we do, I'd like to welcome our 11th guest, our Heaven 11 guest. Um, and this is Teriki Barnes, who serves as the director of the TRIO Upward Bound Math Science program at Southeastern Oklahoma State University in Durant, Oklahoma. Teriki previously served as director of the institution's Educational Opportunity Center. With over 25 years of experience in TRIO, Teriki brings expertise in program leadership, compliance, student service, and success strategy, and advocacy at the state, regional, and national levels. Teriki is the immediate past president of the Southwest Association of Student Assistance Programs, our regional TRIO association, which is one of 10 regional TRIO associations. That association that we call our Southwest Trio Association is SWASAP, which represents Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. In this capacity, Teriki serves as the board of directors for the Council for Opportunity in Education, known as COE, which is our advocacy organization in Washington, D.C. Through being on this board, she contributes to national advocacy and policy conversations that advance educational access for first generation and low income students, the students that we serve in Trio. She also serves as vice president of the Walter O. Mason Education Foundation. I'm wearing that shirt today, so I'll have you know that. Supporting scholarship initiatives for TRIO participants across the SWASAP region while honoring Dr. Mason's enduring legacy of opportunity and excellence. In addition to her board service, which I call trio service work, but Triki's, coined her own term, board service, because she has to be that special. Triki has mentored regional leaders through COE's Executive Leadership Institute and served as faculty for the Council's Sustaining Excellence and Priority 3 and Priority 6 trainings. A proud trio alumna of Student Support Services from the Murray State College Student Support Services program, Teriki is deeply committed to expanding educational access and empowering the next generation of scholars and leaders. Her message is simple and steadfast: Trio works. Well, um, welcome, Teriki. Very
Thank
much
you.
welcome. And I would like to plug for questions at the end for everyone returning or new to our podcast. You can around later in the time in the interview, I'll announce when it's time that you can post questions or comments in the chat. Um, and then we'll entertain our guests with those questions or comments. So, Triki, moving forward, from your bio that you sent me, what did you really remember from your experience in student support services at Murray State College?
So I remember prior to actually enrolling at Murray State College, I remember my senior year, I was very scared. I knew that I was supposed to go to college, but I also knew that I wasn't ready to go to college. And I was the youngest sibling out of six, or I am the youngest sibling out of six in my family's household. And my mother only has a fifth grade education. And so for her, it was very important for all of her children to get an education, to graduate high school and to go to college or complete a post-secondary degree. And so I knew that that was my responsibility, but I really had no idea how I was supposed to start, what I was supposed to do, and I was very anxious and very scared. And I remember my oldest sister, she had attended Murray State College and she went through the SSS program. And actually, all of my sisters did. I have three sisters. All of them utilized the SSS program at Murray State. And I remember my oldest sister, she knew I was worried, she knew I was stressed, and she said, "Don't worry, there's a program at Murray State that's going to help you. It's called Student Support Services." And she encouraged me and she said, "They're going to walk you through every process, everything that you need to do to get your degree." And so whenever I enrolled at Murray State, I connected with SSS. And the thing that stands out the most is that they were just very encouraging and very supportive. And I remember Linda Taylor was the director at that time. And Linda is no longer with us, but she's left an impression on many students who walk through those doors. Unfortunately, also, that program is no longer at Murray State. But again, it left an impression on not just myself, but so many students that were able to utilize those services through that program. Um, but anyway, Linda and her staff were just so welcoming. They were encouraging. And they always said, if you have any questions, if you have any problems, anything, just any questions, don't be afraid to come by here. We'll help you figure it out. We'll find who does have those answers for you. So I just remember it was being in an atmosphere that was open and welcoming because I came from a very small school. I graduated from Wapanucka. We only had 12 in our graduating class. And, at the time, I think there were only 400 people in our town. We had a four-way stop. That was it. And so for me, going from Wapanucka to Tishomingo was kind of a little bit of a culture shock because I felt like that was a large town. And even the campus, I felt like it was very large compared to what I was used to being around. And so just walking through that campus and walking into SSS, I immediately felt like I had a place that I could go and be able to have all of my questions answered. So again, it was just a very welcoming environment for me and very encouraging. And I knew that if I had issues or if I had concerns, I could go to one place and not have to go to all these different offices to try to find help.
What is it that they did directly or indirectly that kind of gave you the idea that they were the place that you could get help from?
Well, first of all, I felt like, they treated me like I was a student, like I was an individual and not just a number or someone just passing through. And I really felt like, well, first of all, they knew who I was. And so whenever I told them my last name, because of my sisters that had gone through the program before, they knew who I was and they said, "Oh, well, you're Miyuki's sister, you're Mariki's sister, you're Chiaki's sister." And so they knew who I was and their faces just lit up and smiles are contagious and so of course my face lit up whenever I knew that they knew who I was. But they told me that I could come to them for anything related to financial aid. If I needed help completing the FAFSA, if I needed help looking for scholarships, which they did help me with all of those things, completing the FAFSA, applying for Pell Grant and OTAG, and scholarships, and helping to maintain my scholarships because I did have two scholarships whenever I began attending there. And I know that they had helped my sisters with applying for vocational rehabilitation because they needed those services when they had attended as well. And so I knew I was going to get immediate help based on the fact that they were helping me find financial aid to pay for school, but also they would help me with advising and enrollment. And so if I wasn't sure what classes I needed to take each semester, I knew I could go to them and get that assistance in getting enrolled in the classes that would not only help me complete my degree, but help me to find those other areas that I might be interested in.
Well, and how did they help you in the process of transferring to Southeastern Oklahoma State University?
So I remember they told me to get connected with the SSS program that was here at or that is here at Southeastern. But I did complete my associate's degree at Murray State, and then just transferring here to Southeastern. Of course, they made sure that all of my financial aid that was eligible to transfer over, or that needed to be submitted to Southeastern, was going to come over. And then, of course, my records, my transcripts, and all of that. They assisted me with all of that. And I remember some of the personal advice that was given to me was they told me to not be afraid to ask questions. And for me, that was always hard, especially when I was younger. I hated asking questions. I was always too afraid, too scared to raise my hand in class. And I think part of that was not only the fear of embarrassment, I guess, because that happens to kids, when you're a kid, sometimes you're afraid to ask questions because you're afraid that you're gonna look silly or people might think that, you're not smart enough or you're not catching on. And so I was always afraid to ask questions. And it was like they saw through me and maybe they picked up on just the energy of me not asking questions of them. But they told me, don't be afraid to ask questions because you need to apply for things. You need to research things and figure things out. And so as you transition, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask questions of, where you can find help. So that was really something that imparting they left with me that was important key advice.
Well, and where did that take you after, where did your career go after you graduated from Southeastern? Because I know the majority, 25 years of experience is in trio.
Hmm.
That's what your bio said.
Yes.
And but you had some job experience before trio. So what what was that experience and what motivated you to switch to a trio position?
So during my time, both at Murray State and whenever I transitioned to Southeastern, I had work study positions. And so at Southeastern, here on campus, I had worked in the print shop for a long time. And after graduation, or actually prior to graduation, I started working at a local grocery store. And then I continued working there after graduation for almost about a year. And then I heard of an opportunity that came available at Southeastern in the Office of Academic Affairs, and it was for the graduate secretary position. And when I looked at the job description, I thought, this is something that I think I'd really like to do because I really felt the need to give back to people in a way that I was helped. And so I decided to apply for the position and I was chosen. And so I was very excited about that. And I had a wonderful opportunity working with wonderful staff in academic affairs and in that office. And I worked there for almost 2 years. And then another position came open, and that was with TRIO, with the Educational Opportunity Center. And during my time in academic affairs, I was somewhat limited to what I could do, the amount of help that I could provide to students, because I was helping students that were applying for admission to graduate programs. And I remember students would come in and they would have more questions and really very similar questions to what I had, but was too afraid to ask when I was a student. And they were asking about, how do I get help with financial aid? Who do I talk to about enrolling in classes? And of course, I would refer them to the different departments or different offices that they needed to go to. But I really felt like my hands were tied, and I really wanted to just, in many cases, just wrap my hands around people and just tell them it's going to be okay. And that there were places that could offer them help because I could tell the stress. I related to the stress and the anxiety that these potential students were having. And so whenever I saw this job description for Educational Opportunity Center, or EOC, I really felt like that was where I needed to be because it matched a lot of those things that I was seeking, those different ways of help that I wanted to be able to provide to students. And I wasn't able to provide in my current position. So, with EOC, I had applied for that position and I was fortunately selected. And at the time, the position was called a guidance specialist, but that was later changed to an EOC advisor. And so, but I was very excited to be chosen to fill that position as an EOC guidance specialist. And the rest was trio history for me.
Well, so the really the kind of desire came from I want to do more,
Hmm.
and the trio position made it to where that you could provide more guidance and support and expertise to more different types of students that needed help.
Yeah.
And out of the confines of what you could do before in academic affairs, you got that experience and brought it over to Trio. And I
Yes.
know that you've helped a lot of students, and I know I have someone chomping at the bit to try to ask you some of those questions. So go ahead.
Um, so for questions or
Yeah, go ahead and ask.
oh,
Go. I'll turn it over to Nick. We have the
okay,
student focused questions now.
sure. I guess one of my questions would be, you spoke about your formative experiences early on with the SSS program at Murray and the SSS program at Southeastern as a participant. My question would be, how did those experiences kind of inform your approach and your ideas and concepts and principles in general that you brought with you when you started as a guidance specialist at the EOC program?
So I really feel like there was a level of compassion and care that is provided through TRIO programs and through TRIO staff that you really don't get anywhere else. And that's just my personal opinion. It doesn't mean that other departments or other staff don't provide that, but I really feel like TRIO staff are kind of a different breed in the sense that, they do provide, they have a level of empathy that not everyone does. And that's what I saw a lot of students needed, myself included. And that's what I wanted to mirror and convey to students, hey, you can get support here, even if it's just listening to you, because sometimes students just need to talk out their problems, right?
Yeah.
And so just having someone to listen to you, but also knowing that you would be able to get some sage advice on what would need to transpire next, what your next steps are, and how to accomplish those next steps. So that was really what I took from my experience as a TRIO participant into that position because I really felt like, there's a level of care that students need, and I want to be the person to help them receive that care.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful perspective. I love that. I love how you mentioned you tie in the empathetic perspective as well alongside the professional, we need to be cognizant of the deadlines, but that doesn't mean
Yeah,
I'm just a robot who's always going to just do it's both
right.
and both. And I think to extend maybe slightly, I would offer one of the values I think that became important to me as well over the course of my time in Trio is inclusivity as well. I think that building our offices, our congregation spaces, our things of that nature to be places where they're absolutely inclusive of every type of person and every individual who comes to the door. It's difficult a lot of times, I think, in terms of both visible and invisible barriers for people who are of the trio population, the first gen low income status, to integrate into campus in several different ways between social clubs or activities or anything of that nature. And so I think that, like you said, reminding ourselves to be empathetic and inclusive of individuals of all kinds is a great value to hold, I think, for trio professionals. So I'm glad you
Yeah,
said that. That was a wonderful perspective.
thank you.
All right. So my next question here, it says, how have you seen the effects? It's sort of a two-part question. How have you seen the effects of Trio on students' lives, and what kinds of student stories can you share that show these positive outcomes?
Yeah, so to answer that, I kind of like to frame a little bit around EOC, and what services are provided through that program. Um, but with EOC, it's a little bit different. So you have, a lot of your it's considered a trio pre-collegiate program. But it's different than Talent Search and Upward Bound because you're working with adult populations, and the goal is to serve individuals 19 years of age or older. And so the focus is on admissions and financial aid. And it sounds pretty simple, but as you're aware, Nick, having worked in EOC as well, you know that it's not always that simple. And
Yeah.
so we do provide at least two services to individuals, but as Cameron mentioned, we may only get one shot to work with that student.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a one and done. And you might see a student one time knock out their financial aid, their admissions, their career counseling, academic advice, all of that in a quick time frame, and then they're off. And so we did try to follow up with a lot of our participants, and I think that we did get a lot of good feedback from them. Um, and so, with that, we're not always sure that every participant is going to come back around. But we did have a couple of participants that I recall, and I'll share their stories here in a minute. But from what I think, to answer your first question, I think for many of the EOC participants that I saw, um, I think that the program was and is impactful because for many of the adults that come through those programs, they've really lost a lot of hope. And sometimes they're even in situations of despair, you know? And it could be a situation where maybe they're homeless or they're at risk of being homeless. It could be a situation where they've lost their job that they've had for 20 years because their plant shut down and now they don't know what to do. It could be a situation of they can't get hired for a job because they don't have a high school diploma. And so, for many of those participants that we would see come through, it can really be life changing just knowing, again, going back to that level of care that is provided. Um, a lot of people that are in those situations, they're just told, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go find a job. And it's not always that easy. And so, when we see individuals in those positions, we want to make sure, again, we're providing that we're reflecting empathy for their situation and then helping them come up with realistic goals. And
Yeah.
I think that, just being able to see how many of those participants came through and when they come in and they're distraught, they're again, some are in despair, and then to see them leave with hope, that makes a big difference. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's wonderful. I love that. I'll share a little bit about my time with EOC as well. I think I agree 100%. I think that the idea and the concept of an EOC program is such that you want to build it up to be empathetic, but also in a sense holistic and versatile to a participant's overall picture of their well-being and their status and everything. So it sort of behooves you when you start thinking about how to build an EOC program to be something greater than the sum of its parts, to incorporate different kinds of community partnerships. And I think that's one of the more rewarding and enjoyable experiences for me that I got to do is, to build these relationships with workforce training programs or vocational, schools or vocational rehab facilities or anything, mental health intervention clinic. I mean, anything, just you amalgamate these resources and you sort of start to build this network of support that you can offer to your participants and say, hey, maybe right now we're not ready to try to go into school, maybe we should focus on something else a little bit first, and that's better for you, I think, in the long run. And so being the sort of the one-stop shop for we can provide referrals and resources in many different kinds of areas, I think is really one of the most significant strengths of EOC that I got to observe. And I love the way you framed it as well. That was wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I saw with a lot of the work, the lives that you touched as well, just being able to, like you said, build up those community connections and yeah, because and this goes for any trio participant, they don't always come in needing just help with education. Food insecurities, housing issues, just paying your utilities, or transportation. I mean, those are just a handful of the issues that we see with a lot of our trio participants. So again, as we've talked about, just being able to provide them that hope and pointing them in the right direction of how to be able to overcome those challenges, I think is a tremendous help to our populations that we serve.
So
Um,
Absolutely.
you saw a lot of students in your time there. What
mhm.
ways did you see them benefit career-wise or move beyond where they thought they could be than before economically?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned, I've got a couple of student stories that I'd love to share, just students that we had worked with. And the first one was a individual. He was actually the same age as me when he came to us, and he was initially interested in going to nursing school out at Kiamichi and Kiamichi Technology Center, and so which is a career tech program. And so he began there. We assisted him with completing his FAFSA and applying for the program. And he was attending school for about 2 months, and he came back to us and he said, I can't do this. This isn't for me. And so we decided, okay, we need to start from step one, backtrack a little bit and see what's his areas of interest. And so we had him come in and do a career assessment. And just through some discussions with him and just talking about, again, his long-term goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, and what it was that he was wanting to do ultimately, we encouraged him to pursue a degree in safety through the safety program offered here at Southeastern. And so for him, at the time he was unemployed. His wife was working, they were raising a family, and he really felt like, he just thought, I need something short term that I can finish real quick because I've got to help support my family. And we talked to him and said, if you'll see this through, this is going to help your family out in more ways than you can imagine. And so he did complete his degree in occupational safety and health, and he had a job waiting for him when he finished, which is one of the many wonderful things about the program. A lot of our students that go through safety have a career waiting for them.
Mhm.
And so he's been working in the safety field with oil companies. And so it's been wonderful to see him transition into that role and, be successful and be happy in his career. And we're very proud of him, to see him go from, again, being in one of those situations of despair that we had talked about early on, and transitioning into a career path that he's really enjoyed. He's making great money, and his family is being taken care of. And that's really, I think that's a goal for a lot of us, right? So
Mhm.
it was great to see him be able to be successful in that and continue to be successful. We do stay in touch through social media, and so I'm very proud of him and all that he's accomplished. And I do have one other story. One of my very first participants that I had worked with when I started with EOC, I was serving in Toka County, and I had met this young lady. She was at the time 19 years old. She was working at Inca Community Services, which is a community action agency. And a lot of people aren't familiar with community action agencies, but much like TRIO, it was birthed out of the War on Poverty. And so it was initiated in the 60s at the same time. And so they have the same goals. Community action agencies have the same goals as TRIO, is to help individuals who are low income to be able to succeed. And so, anyway, I met this young lady. She was 19, she was a single mom, and she was working the front desk. She was working the switchboard, and she was greeting individuals that came in. And so I had stopped by there, and she asked, what I do. And so I explained to her about EOC and how we help individuals who are wanting to pursue a degree. And she said, I'd like to go to college someday, but I just don't think it's right for me. And I said, well, how come? And she said, well, nobody in my family's gone to college. And, I'm raising my son on my own. I live with my mom. I don't have a car. I don't have a way to get back and forth to school. And, I've got to work. And I said, well, there are ways that you can manage that. I said, it's not always an easy juggle, but there are ways that you can do that. And so we talked a little bit more, and she'll tell you this. We joke about it to this day. She'll tell you I bugged her all the time. I would go back every week, and I'd talk to her a little bit more about college and about school. And so finally, she agreed to a campus tour with me. And so I brought her up here to the campus, and we looked at housing, which at the time, Southeastern had family housing. And so we looked at that. We looked at the different programs and different departments, and we completed her FAFSA, and she completed her admissions as well. And so I took her to see different people on campus and just get her introduced. I took her to SSS and let her meet some folks there. And so she was on her path to college, and then she contacted me a couple of weeks later, and she said, "I don't think I can do this. I'm not ready." And so we talked about it a little bit, and I talked to her about, what some of her fears or what some of the obstacles were for her. And she felt a little bit intimidated coming to a 4-year college. And she said, "I'm not sure if I'm ready for that yet." And I said, "Well, let's look into a 2-year option for you, or a different program pathway." So eventually she ended up enrolling at Murray State College. And she did complete her associates through Murray. And then she decided at that time she was going to transfer to Southeastern. And so she did eventually complete her bachelor's in business administration from Southeastern. Um, and something that, I like to share with people, is that for adults who are going to college, the path is never linear. It's never a
Mhm.
straight point A to point B line. There's always going to be peaks and valleys because, like in her situation, you may have transportation issues, or you're raising your family, or you're trying to work a full-time job at the same time.
Life happens. Life
Yes,
happens.
absolutely. Life continues to happen, and it's not going to slow down. It's not going to stop
Hmm.
for us. And so it took her about 8 years to complete her degree. And then when she completed, she told me, she said, "You know what? I'm not done learning yet." And so she came to Southeastern and she got her master's in business administration. And so right now, she is actually the executive director of Inca Community Services. And so the young lady, the young single mom who was 19 that was working the front desk at the office in Atoka, Oklahoma, when I first met her, is now the executive director of the entire program covering 5 counties in southern Oklahoma. And so, she had big goals, big dreams, but she just wasn't sure how to get there. And I just helped give her a nudge in the right direction. And I think that's what a lot of trio staff do, is that we point people in the right direction. It's always the student. The student
Hmm.
accomplishes the goals. But sometimes they just need a little bit of encouragement, and just pointing people in the right direction, and saying, "Hey, that door looks like something you should walk through." I think of her often, and I always tell her I'm so proud of her. And she's not finished yet. She's still got a lot of things that she wants to accomplish. So um, yeah, I'm very proud of her, and seeing where she came from and what she went through to achieve those goals.
But isn't she active in civic engagement in Atoka too? I thought she was
Yes,
on the city
so
council.
she was. Now she served on the city council, I want to say, for 7 years in Atoka.
Wow.
She did not win her election this year, but she said that she was very proud of the time that she was able to serve. She was very proud and humbled. And she said that it was an honor for her to serve, and she will continue to serve Atoka County in any way that she can. So, um, yeah, she's taken a slightly different path, but she's still in service and giving back to her community.
Yeah, that's what I love about the story is it comes full circle.
Yes.
You felt like you were treated well in your trio program, then you
Hmm.
decided to work in the field and you said you wanted to provide more help for people and
Hmm.
then you helped her and now she's helping other people. It's like a
Absolutely.
full circle of resilience. That's what
Yeah.
I like about the so much.
Yeah,
Uh,
it sure is. And I think that for a lot of people who are trio participants, or have some sort of background in trio, I think that for many, myself included, we were helped at one time. Someone showed that compassion and care again, that empathy to me and my family. And when you get to where you're going, you don't pull that ladder of success up behind you. You make sure other people know how to find those rungs on the ladder, and how to get there as well. because that's really what we want. That's how we build better communities. That's how we build better nations. It's just, being able to show that compassion and care and helping others. And so I think it makes us stronger as a whole.
Well, in your current position as Upward Bound math science director, have you seen any students that you're like, they're going to be the Dr. Mike Davis? They're going to be the
Yes.
Dr. Mike Davis. Because that's where
Yeah.
Mike Davis started was Upward Bound math
Yes.
science.
Absolutely, absolutely, he did. And I do. I see many of our students, and I'm just so excited whenever I see their eyes light up. If we whenever we're in summer component, when they're in classes, or if we're on trips and they're seeing these different occupations and different careers. Because a lot of the time, being in rural communities, students and kids and adults, they don't know that there are opportunities outside of what we see on the daily. And so just being able to see different careers, different pathways, different things that they can accomplish, I love it. I love to see their eyes light up and, realize, just to see the excitement in their face when they realize, oh, this is something that I actually like and I could actually do. And so, for many of our Upward Bound math science students, um, we see them light up in that way, and it's just very rewarding because, you know, just knowing again their histories and their backgrounds and the limitations that are set before them, and just at the same time being able to encourage them and say, hey, these limitations don't define you. Let's find ways around them. Let's figure out how to get around these and move you past these obstacles so that you can pursue those dreams. So it's very rewarding. And I like to, I was blessed being able to work in EOC, and now I feel even more blessed being able to work in Upward Bound Math Science because I love working with the kids.
Well, and one of your strengths and talents is you have a lot of passion.
Hmm.
And what was your quote? Fire, put your fire to
Turn your fear into fire.
I would turn your fear into fire. I was like, I know, like you start like starting fires. I just like that.
I guess so. I
That's the way
guess.
I think of it.
Oh,
I'm like you're kind of a metaphorical pyromaniac, I guess.
Yeah.
But you surround yourself with people that are also passionate, and that's where, you know, you lit that flame of passion into Nick and other people that you work with, and that's a really good asset.
Yes.
I the other fires that you said that are literal fires, I don't tell anyone about, you know.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are all in rural communities. So
Yeah.
there's no,
They're all controlled
they're
burns,
all
right?
controlled and not during firebans.
So before you liked starting fires,
Hmm.
let's go back in time. Let's just imagine maybe you still like started fires when you were even a kid. I don't know, but let's go back in time to the Teriki that's moved past making fires in Wapanucka, and you've earned your associate's degree.
Uh-huh.
You're maybe thinking about starting adult fires somewhere else, but you're not
Mhm.
there yet. Um, you arrive to that person, you go back in time and see that person. What words of advice would you give that future fire starter?
I would tell the future fire starter, don't be afraid to ask questions. Um, don't be afraid of challenges, because challenges are what help us grow. They what help us learn. And when I tell you, anybody that grew up with me would tell you the same, but I was a very timid and very shy child. And so I would not ask questions. So I would go back and I would tell myself, don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't be afraid to come across a challenge and accept that challenge. Because it's going to build you as a better person. It's going to build you as a stronger person. It's going to help you have grit, and it's going to help you overcome a lot of those challenges that you have in your future.
Well, and I think like it developed you for leadership, and I wonder like. I know I was in your ELI group, and I actually got the Roberts Rules of Order book. It's still on my shelf
Uh-huh.
from when I was in ELI, and I know Nick was
Yep.
actually in your SWASAP ELI when you were president. He was in that cohort.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you want to talk about what trio service work has helped you and who's helped you, how it's helped you, and how you think that crosses over into your positions that you hold now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very proud of my trio service work. And I'll tell you, whenever I first started, it was not too far into my journey with EOC. I think I had worked in EOC for maybe 2.5 years. And Chris Simpson and Al White, who both worked in Talent Search, they approached me and said, "Hey, we think you should run for this position that's on the ODSA board, which is the state Oklahoma Division of Student Assistance board." And so I was just like, "No, I'm still too green. I've just started in Trio." And they were just like, "Well, just think about it because we see a lot of potential in you." And so I had talked to my director. My director at the time was Liz Ashton, and she was just like, "Yeah, I support you, so go for it if you feel like you want to take on that challenge." And so, I thought, why not? This is going to give me a different perspective of the inner workings of the state association. And so I ran for that position and I won.
And
And
you were like, after that, you're like, no more
no
at
more,
all.
no
Yeah.
more. And I will say during that time, because that role was the public relations coordinator. And so part of my role was to document all of the events through media. And so one of the events that I got to attend was the policy seminar, the Council for Opportunity in Education's policy seminar. And so that was a great event for me to be able to go to and to be able to experience. But that event is where TRIO professionals and alumni and supporters can all meet in DC. We meet with our legislators and lawmakers to talk about the importance of TRIO and why we need to continue funding our programs. And so my my work at that event, it was the very first time I had gone and I was terrified. I'm not really sure why I was terrified, but I think you could both tell too, like from your experience, it's a little intimidating. And
Oh,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, we went in the big year. Nick and I were there. We all
uh-huh,
went to the same. We actually have that bond of all three of us were did it together at
yes,
the with, and we went to Representative Rakeen's office.
yes, yes,
But we were there at a huge. Nick and I were there at a huge year, and
mm-hmm,
so it was very honestly, it was very intimidating just because of there were over 1,000 people there, and normally it's
mm-hmm,
just like 500 or 600, I think.
yeah. And
I
you
absolutely
really,
agree.
yeah. So you really feel like there's a weight on your shoulders too, right? Like there's a lot that you're carrying because you're not only carrying a personal message, but you're carrying the message of Trio as a whole. And so I remember that first year, I guess other people could see the terror on my face. And I was scared and I just thought, oh, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I don't know what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna freeze up. And a trio legend in our state, Cheryl Doris, who was with Cameron University, she came up to me and she was like, "Teriki, are you okay? You feeling all right?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm pretty nervous. I'm kind of scared." And she said, "I want you to remember a couple of things. First of all, these are elected officials, so they work for you. But she said, I also want you to remember that you have lived this experience as a trio participant. You work in trio And everything that you do, all you have to do is just share it with them. Share the importance of the message, why Trio needs to be here, why it needs to be sustained. And she ended with, tell them what you know. And that is something that I have carried with me through every leadership capacity. Is just thinking back to those wise words that she shared with me. Tell them what you know. So I take that with me to every policy seminar that I go to. I take it with me in at every SWASAP conference, ODSA conference, just sharing that message of TRIO and why it's so important. And I really feel like in every leadership capacity, it's so important for people to know the meaning behind the mission. If we don't share with others our shared goals, what is the mission that we're trying to accomplish, people can't buy in. They if they don't understand the full concept and see the global perspective of why we're doing what we're doing, they can't always buy into it. And so it's so important if you're in a leadership capacity to take the time to explain to people why it is that we do what we do. What is that personal story behind why it is that you're wanting to share this message and convey this message. And I think that gives people the option. It gives them the choice of, hey, I want to be a part of this. This is something big, and I would love to join in on this. That's not the case for everybody, but it does give people that opportunity that if they want to join, the Trio movement, be a part of Trio Nation, then they can. But yeah, just telling people what we know is so important. It's a small message, but it has powerful meaning behind what we do.
Well, you touched on a lot of stuff related to gratitude, and before we move into segment four,
Mhm.
um, uh, I'd like to tell everyone who's attending that if you want to post your questions or comments to the chat, this would be a good time, and Nick and I will read them. There's two more things that I want to touch on,
Okay.
and what do you do? So what do you do to show to practice gratitude? Like how do you practice that regularly? And I think answering that question helps people listening know how
Mhm.
they can do that in their own life. And then after that, I'd like you and Nick to talk about your neat Walter O. Mason project that you did when you were SWASAT president and how Nick worked on that too.
Mhm.
Sure.
So first the gratitude question, then transition into that, and then we'll take comments.
Sure. So, what I do on a personal level, just to reflect gratitude, is, and again, this sounds simplistic, but there's so much to it. I touch grass. I touch grass and I drink water. Um, no, I really I joke about it, but I
You
feel
start
like
fires too.
well, you can't really do that on healthy grass, I guess. But that's what I try to touch. Um, but what I have realized, and I joke about it, but I'm like, some days I wake up and when I'm stressed out, and I'm just like, you know what? I feel like 80% of my problems would be solved if I just touch some grass and drink some water because, a lot of it is personal. And so if I wake up grumpy, if I wake up with a headache, if I just wake up fatigued or whatever, I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back. But I really do. I practice grounding a lot, which or some people call it earthing. But if you're not familiar with it, I just like to go out and I like to let my bare feet touch the ground. I try to have my feet touching the ground for at least 10 to 15 minutes. There are a lot of people that practice that, would recommend more time, but working in an office, it's not always conducive to being able to touch grass. And so I try to make sure, that I do get some time where I'm just putting my feet in some clover or, just fresh grass. It's very calming, it's very relaxing. Um, there are some scientific properties behind it as well that a lot of people reflect on. And so I just feel like it's very important for us to get back to really some of the simple things in life at times, just remembering maybe it was a memory from your childhood when you ran across the yard barefoot, in fresh grass. And just being able to remember what that feels like. It feels cool, it's soft. And just reflecting on those senses whenever you are doing that is very important to me. So again, that and drinking water. But and then I also just try to make sure on a professional level, and I guess this is personal as well, but I like to laugh. And we've had some laughs here even today, but I like to laugh with my colleagues. I like to have a good time. I like to sit around and talk with them and just spend time asking how was your weekend, or did you do anything cool, or just how things are going. And I feel like that
Do you
helps.
like white cowboy
I
hats? Do you
love
listen to
white
the
cowboy
female
hats.
90s
Yes.
90s country stars?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so, just those little things, I think it's important because that's how we also build relationships with people, just taking time to get to know each other, have some laughs, talk about those things that bring us joy. So I feel like that's so important.
And then you guys worked collaboratively on that Walter O. Mason thing
Mhm.
project, which we touched on that in your bio, and I think it's good to pass on that knowledge to students that are listening today. So I'll hand that over to you, and then we've got some questions, but I'll let you guys touch on that.
Sure. Just to sort of give a brief overview, that was a project each year in the regional organization, like Teriki had mentioned. The standing president will give essentially a charge to a cohort of about 8 individuals each year to perform some service project or better the organization and advance its goals in some way. And so last year, Teriki was the standing president for that organization, and I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to be in the SWASAP Emerging Leaders Institute cohort that year. And so the charge that Madam President Teriki Barnes had charged us with was to amalgamate and create a web page for a historical archive in the sense of an individual called Walter O. Mason Jr. This was a highly influential figure in Oklahoma Trio itself. He was instrumental in organizing and advancing and advocating many different ways and avenues and methods throughout the time period about the 60s and 70s early on in Trio. But yeah, so that was a great part of the experience for me as well. We got to work hand in hand with other participants in the ELI cohort from, like she mentioned, Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Oklahoma was ours. But the trio participant that I was from our other state was Erica Vesco, and she was very talented in the technical side of setting up the website and placing all the different infographics. But yeah, it was very much a team effort to amalgamate and to synthesize all these different historical articles and resources that we could link to and gather information from to create a web page on the SWASAP website. And I was really proud with how it turned out. I think it was a nice comprehensive overview of his life and his contributions, and touching on his philosophy and sort of the why behind why he did what he did and how he felt it was important to him. And yeah, it was a wonderful experience. And I'm grateful that that was the charge that Teriki gave us to our cohort that year. I really enjoyed getting to participate.
Yeah, and they did. Nick's cohort did a fantastic job. They really brought that vision to life. What I had hoped they would pull together, they did. Because at the time, we did not have a single um, website that just gave all of the information about Walter O. Mason. And he, like Nick mentioned, he's a legacy within Trio. He's a major historical figure. He's considered the father of Trio. And, even at the national level with COE, they have an annual award that they give out in his name. And so I really felt like at the time, it's still relevant today. It's so important for people who aren't familiar with Walter O. Mason to be able to go to one website and find all of this information and resources about him, all of his history, and then all of the resources that are available today. And thank you for putting that in the chat. So,
Yeah.
anybody that is interested can find this information on Walter O. Mason. And then we also have our annual scholarship that the Walter O. Mason Education Foundation provides each year to residents. Actually, it goes to we have an award for each of the 5 states that are in our region. But, if you're listening from Oklahoma or watching from Oklahoma or any of the 5 states in our region, and you're a student that qualifies, you can actually apply for this scholarship. So, yeah, we're very proud of the work that Nick's cohort did.
Nick does a good job at anything. I wish I could have
Yes.
his level of booyah, but I don't.
You've got your
But
own level of booyah.
well, I mean, we have a fire starter, we have a booyah, and we have a talker. That's why I thought I can talk. This is like sitting on somebody's front porch without having heat stroke,
Yes.
and and just talking.
Yes.
So there are a couple of questions, and you've done a very good job and been a very wonderful guest with us.
Thank you.
Um, it was like Paul Harvey's "This Is Your Life," but Trey, who's in the Student Support Services Teach program, said, "I really like that your journey and career with Trio have come full circle. What would you say to a student in Trio who might be interested in working with them one day?"
Oh, that's a great question, Trey. And I feel like many of the students and participants within Trio make the best staff, just because of the fact that you have the lived experiences. And so, what I would say, my recommendation is complete your degree. Finish your bachelor's degree if you don't already have it. Consider pursuing a master's degree as well. Um, Now, for many trio positions, you don't necessarily have to have a master's degree, but it never hurts to also have that master's in your pocket. And so, pursue those degrees and continue working in service, because I think a lot of the TRIO programs look for service related positions. So, if you have any of that occupational experience of helping others, like you may have been helped, then that's something that it's a transferable skill, and it's a relatable skill that will be helpful in a TRIO career. So, good luck to you, and I hope that that is a successful endeavor for you in the future.
And then Angelica, who was our speaker, I think 8 or 9. I can't remember if she was speaker 8 or 9. But thank you for what you do, Teriki. I loved hearing your story. I love your empathetic approach to your work. What are your favorite conversations to have with students?
So, my favorite conversations to have with students, I like to ask them about their families. I like to ask them about, well, and it's a little bit different for adults and teens. Adults, I think that they typically like to talk about either their families or their careers, maybe their dreams. And teens, they like to talk about their dreams as well, what they look forward to in the future. And so I really just kind of like to gauge, based on what our conversations or what our experiences are throughout the day. And so, if an adult comes in and they were needing assistance, I would just kind of ask them, about what they've been doing that day. And it'll kind of lead into, well, I was dropping my daughter off at daycare, and then, I would ask, "Oh, how old is your daughter?" and just kind of go into it from there. And if people have healthy relationships, they usually like to talk about their families. And so that's something that I always like to gauge to see if it's a good conversation starter for them. And sometimes that's the same with teens too. I've found with some of our teens that we work with, they'll start talking about younger siblings and if they take care of them or if they play sports with them and so again, if it's a healthy relationship, I kind of like to gauge and talk about families with individuals.
Okay, and then we have another person who's new to student support services. Mita Morris says, I can really relate to finding it hard to ask questions and get out of my comfort zone. Even at 50, I still get social anxiety when I'm around more than a few people. You have really encouraged me to be comfortable with asking about any information I may need during my transition to a new career. Thank you. So
You
that was her comment. So,
That's wonderful. I'm glad to have been of help, and I know that it's not easy. And I will say that I have people will not believe this about me, but I have suffered with social anxiety for many, many years, for many decades, and that was even, in my childhood. That's what made me. They didn't have a word for it back then, but they just said that I was shy, but it was really social anxiety. And so, to be able to help someone who may uh, who may suffer, I know that it's not easy asking those questions, and it's definitely never easy asking for help. But I hope that, some of my message does encourage you today and continue asking those questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And even if you ask a question that's already been asked, that's okay. Ask it anyway. So just keep challenging yourself and you'll get there.
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that you've done a great job today, and I want to thank
You.
you. I know Nick and I, it was like a homecoming. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's been fun.
the only thing missing was Washington, D.C. and
Yep.
Representative Burkeen's aide,
Yep. And our scarves. Our
yeah, and
Yeah.
our
scarves.
scarves, which I don't have here in the office. But
Mhm.
the that was a great idea to include those scarves when we
Yes.
went to policy. And policy honestly is we want more alumni to come with us each year.
Mhm.
And if any alumni in the at any time is interested in, it's like the first or second week of always of March.
Mhm.
And our elected officials really love to hear from alumni more than anyone else. And they like to, because that's the product of what we're doing. That's the evidence of what we're doing. And so
Mhm.
if any student, current student or former is interested in that, contact any of us here at Southeastern, and our state organization is very interested in that aspect too.
Mhm.
Um, but thank you very much, Teriki, for all that you've passed on as far as wisdom in today's interview, and letting us see how Trio works in a lot of different settings and throughout a lot of different time frames. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank y'all for having me. It's been a blast and I've enjoyed the mini reunion.
That was wonderful.